Welcome to Day 84 on the Trail. We have 5 readings for today, from Acts 27 verse 39 through 28:10, Leviticus chapter 20, Proverbs 17 verse 1 through 18:24, the 82nd Psalm, and Tobit chapter 8 verses 1 through 18. After arriving on the beach in Malta, with all 276 souls safely rescued from the ship, they are greeted with what Luke describes as unusual kindness. Hospitality was an important cultural practice in the ancient world. For example, Abraham offers lavish hospitality to the 3 travelers who approached him by the oaks of Mamre in Genesis 18. Also, in many of the conversion stories recorded in the New Testament, hospitality is often the immediate result of accepting the message of Jesus. For example, the Philippian jailer immediately cares for the needs of Paul and Silas after accepting Jesus in Acts 16. Now, after the citizens kindled a fire to warm the survivors, Paul is bitten by a viper. At first, the citizens of Malta who had gathered on the beach assumed Paul was guilty of murder, and the viper was viewed as divine punishment. However, when the viper's venom did not affect Paul, they changed their minds and began to say that he, Paul, was a god, according to verse 6. Here, we also find a connection to the 72 disciples that Jesus sent out with the message of the kingdom of heaven in Luke 10, verse 19, which reads, "Behold, I have given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions, and over the power of the enemy. Nothing shall hurt you." While on Malta, Paul heals the father-in-law of a high official on the island of dysentery. This will be the final miracle performed by Paul in Acts. In response, the people of Malta honor Paul and his companions and help provide provisions for the remainder of their journey. As Paul begins the final leg of his travels to Rome, we see in these 2 episodes how the earliest Christians carried the message and ministry of Jesus from Jerusalem to the center of power in the known world. In Tobit chapter 8, I would like to briefly touch on the marriage of Tobias to Sarah. What I find most interesting in this account is the stark contrast between Tobias and his father-in-law, Raguel, and the way that each of them approaches the wedding night. As noted earlier in our story, each of Sarah's 7 husbands had died on their wedding night at the hands of the demon Asmodeus. So everyone is aware of the danger, and apprehension in the family abounds. However, after the parents leave the room, Tobias suggests that he and his new bride turn to God and pray for safety. Then, after concluding their prayer, they went to sleep. Raguel, the father-in-law, takes a much different, almost comical approach. He calls for a servant to quietly go and dig a grave for Tobias, just in case. If Tobias does perish in the night, like his predecessors, Raguel hopes to bury Tobias and avoid public disgrace. It is not until the grave has been dug and Raguel has confirmed through a maid that Tobias is still alive that he turns to God in prayer. Finally, from the book of Proverbs. I believe that Proverbs 18 verse 2 seems particularly applicable in our world today. Proverbs 18 verse 2 says, "A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion." A more literal translation would read, "A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but rather in revealing what is in his heart." The lesson here is that a foolish person does not seek to gain understanding or take the time to seek knowledge. Instead, he or she will simply blurt out their opinion or what happens to be on their mind at the time, even if they know little about the topic. Then in Proverbs 18:15, we find the opposite, a complete reversal of the person described in verse 2. An understanding heart acquires knowledge, and the ears of the wise seek out knowledge. Today, we live in an age fueled by social media and a pervasive anonymity that is provided by technology. Far too often, opinions are treated as facts, truth is considered relative, and knowledge is tragically undervalued. As the book of Proverbs continually reminds us, God is the singular source of truth and wisdom. In the words of Jesus, He is the way, the truth, and the life. Therefore, truth cannot, by definition, be dependent upon our opinions or conceptions. Instead, the search for true wisdom takes discipline and dedication, courage and conviction. As George Orwell once said, in a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, stay on the trail.